Welcome to A Leader's Story, where we explore the unique paths of extraordinary leaders. In each episode, we ask the same 7 questions to our guests, revealing the diverse journeys and insights that shape their success. Join us as we uncover the stories that make each leader's experience truly one of a kind. Today, we are honored to have JuneAn Lanigan, an accomplished leader in the tech industry. Currently serving as an advisor at Provoke Solutions, JuneAn has held pivotal roles, including SVP, CIO, and Chief Data Officer at FTC Solar, and VP of IT Digital Technology at Western Digital. She's known for her strategic vision, driving business transformation, and a true commitment to diversity as a co-chair for the Women Impact Network and an executive sponsor for Women in IT. Let's dive right into today's episode. JuneAn, what is one decision you made that was a turning point for your leadership?
Gosh, I had to think back many years across many decisions that I've made, but I think that this one really resonates the most with me. And that was really about 10 years into my career. I was on an ERP project where the management, and I was representing master data, customer data, product data, vendor data, etc. And the directive from management was that we would install a bleached vanilla, not just vanilla, but a bleached vanilla out of the box software package with no customizations whatsoever. The thought was that the business would adjust its business processes to fit to the system, and that would work just fine. Well, after about a 2-year implementation phase, we went live, and our accounts receivable went through the roof. And customers were very upset with their invoices, as well as upset about the amount of adjustments they needed to make to now do business with us the way we were doing business on our new system. And so it worked internally, but it didn't work for our customers and partners. So I was asked if I would lead a re-implementation of that ERP system with a focus on customer. And I called it CORE, Customer Oriented Reengineering. It was to touch all of our customers and partners. I engaged every functional leader across the organization and took them to a week-long customer-centric process design conference in Boston. Wow. And they finally got it. Customer first.
Yep.
I had their full support as we redesigned the critical customer-facing interfaces, customer-facing processes, and we got our customers and our partners involved early in the testing and also on sign-off before we went live. So, I think in thinking back on it and, to answer your question, what was turning point and what were the key lessons that I learned, here's a few. 1, always think customer first. So whether that's your external customer or your internal customer, from that point forward, I always wanted to know what the true end user had to experience in anything that I was implementing.
Yeah.
2 was to have courage to recognize a problem, to escalate it, and put an action plan in place that would quickly address the root cause.
Yeah.
3rd, engage executives early in the process as well, because ultimately they're accountable for success. And lastly, I'd say always be open to learning something new, and no matter what level you are in the organization. And so it was a tremendous experience for me as somebody actually junior in the organization at that time, to work directly with the executives to set new direction and then to re-implement it into the organization, where not only I was learning, everyone was learning.
That's good. That's really good. So leading into that, so how do you foster innovation and creativity within your team?
Well, it's kind of a follow-on to that last question, because when we went to that customer-centric process design meeting, one of the things that we learned was this approach or this process called assumption busting. I'd never heard of it before, and as probably you haven't, or others, or at least haven't in this context. Yeah. But essentially what it means is that if you have a problem, you need to think backwards. You need to think about, what is the problem? What is in our design, whether it be a product design or a process design or an organization design, that is creating that problem. And the third is, why did we design it that way? What was the assumption at that point in time that drove us to that design, which is now creating this problem? The
Yeah.
point is that everything always changes. And, legacy will make decisions that that you stay true to for years and years and years, although the business changes, the organization changes, the market changes, etc. And so I found it a really healthy way in leading my teams to, one, have them think this way. What problem are we solving? And don't just come up with a brand new solution, a new design. Be really cognizant of what isn't working on the design we have today and why. What assumptions was it built at? Because if those assumptions are no longer valid, you have free license to redesign.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
And you
Yep, yep.
redesign, you test to make sure it no longer creates that problem, but actually solves the problem. So what this means for teams, I find it, when you take this approach, it's very liberating. One, people don't feel threatened like they made a mistake.
Mm.
It isn't that they made a mistake. It's just we're working with a design that's ill fit to what we're trying to accomplish now, given our new set of assumptions. My favorite is because the CEO wanted it that way. The
Yep.
CEO left the company 5
All
years
heard that.
ago. I think we can redesign, right? But I
Yep.
found that in using this process with every team I've had over the last 20 years, it really helps teams get unstuck without placing blame or feeling shame. And it actually simulates a lot of creative thinking because, like, oh, I have an opportunity here to do things really radically different because of the circumstances we're under today. I don't feel like I have to hold on to a legacy. I actually can be innovative and creative as I move forward to either solve problems or create something new. The important thing I always stress to people, though, is make sure to document your assumptions because 2
Yeah.
years from now, when you're not there and people are having problems, they have something to refer back to. It's like, oh, no, that assumption is no longer valid. If the assumption is still valid, you just have to get creative with your design. How are you going to design around the problem then?
Yep. That's really good. That's really good. And so I think that kind of leads us really well into the third question. So, how do you balance driving results with maintaining a positive team culture?
I feel my role as a leader and the leaders above me are all accountable to set a vision and communicate it clearly so that everybody is on board. I think
Yeah.
that's extremely important. If you assume that everyone's going to know what you want or
Yep.
where you're going and you haven't told them, I guarantee they're not going to be in the same place and that will become very frustrating for them, right? So, I think you have to define your why. Why are we doing what we're doing? What does it look like next year, the next year, the next year? And, so what are the long-term, medium-term goals of that vision? And at that point, I really like to turn it over to my leaders, the leaders who have the majority of the team reporting directly to them.
Yeah.
They get to set the how and the when and engage directly with their teams, so that you're actually driving to results. Everybody's marching to the same vision with the same playbook, knowing what their part is in getting the results. And I think people feel ownership for it then when it's approached like that versus I have no idea what they want. I'll just do what I do, and so you get a lot of buy-in. My assumption is everybody wants to be, going back to my assumptions, my assumption is everyone wants to be part of something big that has impact and
Yeah.
has meaning, so every day you come to work, I think people really set out their day to be successful. And so if you foster an environment that really stimulates thinking, stimulates camaraderie, stimulates a common goal, I think you have a much better success of doing that. Another thing that I started when I was at Western Digital, which I think had a big impact on my team, was I actually simulated a quarterly business review, even on my own team, where every leader would give a state of the, a quarterly update on where they were. And even though they may not have owned a budget, they had a budget. They had resources, they had projects, they had money that they were stewarding to spend for
Yep.
the organization. And they had targeted goals to achieve within that quarter. And in the quarterly business review, it not only gave that person, that leader's team, a platform of visibility to showcase to everybody else what they've done. Every team was also learning what every other team was doing, because we're all working towards the same goal. We just have a different, part that we're playing. And so as you start sharing what others are doing, they really feel more part of a total team and not a
Yeah.
smaller, isolated team. And I think that really motivates people towards what is the goal we're trying to accomplish, which is what I need us to do, but
Yeah.
also what are the results that we're getting? And that's what the teams need to do.
Yeah, and I'll add, I was one of the leaders on the team that was part of those QBRs. And I'll be honest with you, in the beginning, it was stressful. I think what you said was act as like your own GM, right? Like you're the general manager for what you're doing. You need to drive it that way, and you need to be able to report on and bring transparency and make sure people know what everyone is doing in each of the teams. And for me, at that point in my journey as a leader, it really was a stretch for me to get there. But in the technology side of things, it's very easy kind of just to rest on the laurels of, what platform has been deployed, how much data we're bringing in. But no, there's real business reasons, and it really helped me to center to that. Going back to even to your first question around customer centric, and what and end users, and why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's to drive the business, to make money, to ultimately to do what the CEO wants us to do, right? So it was impactful for me too, as one of those team leaders.
Again, everybody wants to do a good job. That is just my belief and my
Yeah.
ethos. And I, as a leader, have to set an environment that enables them to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we'll take a little bit of a different turn on this next question. And can you describe a moment when you had to make a tough ethical decision?
Yeah, I had to think about this because I honestly don't think I've ever had to make a hard choice. Although when I started thinking about how I would respond, it is true that there are hard choices you have to make. And so one that was top of mind is, in IT, you have to deal with a lot of vendors. And
Hmm.
so I rely heavily on our procurement organization to put together fair and ethical processes for us to evaluate products, evaluate vendors, and ultimately select the right vendor for the right cost in a very ethical manner. And I'm grateful for a procurement organization who holds that as their responsibility, because then I can follow that and ensure that we're doing the right things. However, occasionally an executive wants to introduce me to a friend
Yep.
that's on the board of a company, wants to introduce me to their son's company, whatever that is. And
Meant
so,
to no names.
yeah, it's kind of this dilemma, right? Of,
Yeah.
okay, I think I owe a courtesy to that executive to at least investigate and do some research on that company so I know who they are, what products they make, and I can start forming my own opinion. Is this something we're looking for or not? Is this something we can afford or not? And then I'm not shy to have a conversation with that executive to say, I investigated it, I looked at it, it's not a fit now, it might be a fit in the future. Their competitors are X, Y, and Z. We're already doing business with their competitors, and really bring them more into the fold of the decision making. And honestly, more times than not, they were just passing on a commitment that they made to me. They
Yeah.
really weren't invested in that particular vendor or
Probably
company.
happened at a dinner over some drinks, and it's
Right.
like,
And
oh
but
yeah, well, yeah.
but to be ethical myself and feel like I'm
Yeah.
doing the right thing, you take the time, you do the
Yeah.
research, and you really think hard. There are, as you know, I mean, there are so many vendors doing
Yeah.
so many niche products. and maybe you do need that thing,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
maybe you already have 12 of that thing and you're trying to reduce. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's right to do the research.
Yep.
It brought me though to another example of that all leaders can relate to, and that's in terminating employees.
Mm,
And that's a very hard thing to do, no matter who you are in an organization. It's, largely justified because of cost reductions. And those are real things that executives and leaders need to solve for, right? Cost
yeah.
situations. But when you are terminating for cause, meaning that there isn't the performance or there's a situation that has to be addressed, while it's hard to do it, it must be done because you're making an impact on the rest of your organization.
Yes.
If
Yes.
that person isn't performing to their best while everybody else is working to succeed or is working counter to the goals of the organization, it's incumbent upon the leader to do the right thing. And there are steps you go through, and you have to do those steps according to HR and legal policies. But it's another thing that I think too many people kind of take the easy way out and say, well, I'll wait till the next riff and then I'll get rid of the bottom five. I learned early in my career, always be looking at your bottom five.
Yeah.
It's just like spending money. If I spend it
Yeah.
foolishly, I can't spend it wisely. So
Yeah.
that's just another, what I would call an ethical situation that leaders face, that they have to step up to.
I think as a leader, especially if it's from a performance perspective, sometimes that making that tough decision because of that, one obviously helps with the team's morale, going back to what we're talking about for keeping a positive team environment. But two, it can be a wake up call for that person also to
Mhm.
say, hey, I need to get my stuff together, and hopefully there's a lesson learned and they improve because of it too, right?
Joe, I
Because
think
if you
you're
just let them continue to stew in what they're doing, you're not doing them a service either, right? Yeah, yeah,
absolutely right. And I think if you can have a candid conversation that is respectful
yeah.
of the other person, you're actually helping them find their better fit.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
And I can't tell you how many of those people that I've had to, exit, have stayed in touch with me and
Yeah.
have asked, I need help. I'm finding myself in this situation. Can you help me? And while you can't stay tethered to all these people
Yeah.
throughout your career,
Yep.
I think that speaks to the fact that you did do it with respect, and that's super important.
Yeah. Actually, I think that leads us well into the next question. So, what role does feedback play in your leadership? How do you both give it and receive it?
My experience is the higher up in the organization, the less direct feedback you get.
Yeah.
You can hear a lot of rumors, whether people like you or don't like you, or, you're doing it well or you're not doing it well. But it really is unfortunate that leaders don't get a lot of direct feedback. And so therefore they have to seek it.
Mm,
And there's multiple ways that you can do that. I think feedback is extremely important. I would love to hear when I'm doing well. I think I'm human.
yeah.
But if I don't know when I'm not doing well, how will I ever fix it?
Yeah.
And it's not just the one thing you didn't do well. There's something underneath that. Maybe it's the values you have that are different. I mean, it can be a host of things that have created a disconnect or a feedback, negative feedback or less than positive feedback. But there's several ways you can do that. One is to work with HR on a 360-degree review, of your of your leaders, of your peers, of your employees, and I find that very helpful. But I think it's important that you really seek it out, and you go to people who will give you honest feedback. Some people, I haven't done this personally, although maybe I have, I just don't call it that. But some people have formed board of directors for themselves, right?
Interesting.
People who are structured to give them feedback. I have mentors, and so that's kind of where I get some feedback as well. And if you're fortunate and you have a good one-on-one relationship with your own leader, you get the feedback that way too. And sometimes it's tough to take,
Yeah.
but ultimately you become a better person. It's just going back to what we were talking about earlier, right?
Yep.
Ultimately you become a better person, and you're more successful in the role that you have, and therefore you're happier, you're more motivated, you're more creative. So it's super important. As far as giving feedback, I don't like the once or twice a year feedback cycles.
Yeah.
I think
Never liked that either.
if I have to surprise somebody every 6 months, that's
Yep.
not good for either one of us, right? I think it's really important with your direct reports. And going back to that quarterly business review, that was one of the ways I was showing my leaders, I'm not just looking for you to be good at your job.
Hmm.
I'm looking at you to grow in your leadership. And so I coached to get everybody into this I'm a general manager mindset, right? I
Yeah.
think it's really important. So, and I want people to succeed. I want people to move into other positions, to move up in their careers. And so whether you call it feedback or coaching, I think I
Mm.
do it pretty constantly.
Yeah.
I think one way you measure as a leader, one way you measure how well you're doing is your attrition rate,
Yeah. That's true.
right?
Yep.
People will silently leave.
Yep.
People will
Yep.
silently move out of your organization.
Yeah.
I'm a cheerleader when somebody comes to me and says, JuneAn, I really want to evolve my career. I want it. There's an opportunity over here. What do you think? That is a very healthy conversation. But
Yes.
I think, it's a key indicator.
Yeah.
When you think about how is a leader doing, you have to look at their attrition. Their
The saying is, you don't leave a job, you leave your manager, you leave your leader most of the time. And that's true, or it's even more that you follow the leaders, right? Like you go to where they go or whatever. So totally, that's huge. I think that's a good segue into our next question. How do you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
I don't know what possessed me to do this, but early in my career, I think well, maybe I do know what possessed me to do this. I was very, very curious as to how people work and what motivates
Hmm.
people to work. And so early in my career, I decided I wanted to be a chief operating officer. And I really didn't have any idea what that meant. I didn't know what a COO actually did, but my perception was this was somebody who understood every part of the organization and how it worked and set strategy to how to grow that organization. And so I took it upon myself to remain open to all opportunities. And so it didn't keep me in one function moving up. I was in finance, then I was in sales, then I was in
Mm.
customer support, then I was in product design, if you can imagine, at one point in time. That's not really my forte, but I did that for a bit. I went into marketing, I went into corporate strategy. I had all these different opportunities to kind of move about the organization and then finally into IT, but it helped me connect. Like
Mm.
how do we work? How do we
Yeah.
actually work? Where are the silos and where are things flowing as they're supposed to flow in the organization? So I think by my curiosity, that stimulated and developed me as a person, and then ultimately as a leader, because I got to the point where I was starting to operate at a higher level of knowledge of how organizations work. And when I was in IT, I could speak to finance. When I was in marketing, I could talk to sales. It just gives you a broader breadth of understanding of business in general.
Yeah.
And so, I think my ethos is that I take what I know and I apply it to new situations. I won't say that I never have imposter syndrome, because we all do.
Yeah.
My imposter syndrome actually can be very positive because it makes me grow, right? It makes me
Okay.
do things differently. But I don't try to say I have to be perfect at something before I try it. I just have to think about what do I know and what have I experienced that I can bring to this role that will impact it?
That's good.
And,
That's
and
really good.
I take that approach. So, my advice to any young leader is, one, show up and be present. Don't
Yeah.
hide. Be out there, be available, and allow yourself to grow with any opportunities and requests. Don't be intimidated by a new experience. Like I was just saying, use what you know, what you're good at, and apply it differently, and you'll be surprised. I often tell people that I mentor that they're hiring because they don't have what you have.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
might not have it in that job, you may not have it in that industry, but you have what they need. They're looking for you to bring your success into that position and then make it flourish, right? And there's
Yeah.
always people to help you with the details.
Yeah.
I'd also say invest in yourself, right? Take the opportunity to go to conferences, webinars, just be curious, right? Always be open to learning. And then lastly, I would just say set goals for yourself. Don't become stagnant. Put the next
Yeah.
thing out there that you want to do, the next thing out there. Because once you name it, you'd be surprised how often you realize that opportunity has been sitting out there,
That's
right?
so good.
You
Yeah.
just, if you don't name it, it'll just pass you by.
Yeah.
and and so that's my advice. That's kind of how I feel like I have tried to develop myself, and that's just advice I would give people on how to develop themselves.
Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. And so, last is, what leadership book has influenced you the most and why?
This is the hardest one. I am a
Same
reader.
with me.
This was, I have three sitting right next to me because I'm hoping you'll let me have three instead of one.
Okay, well, let's do it.
No, but I'll go with the one first, and then I'll try to sneak in the other two. So the first one is this: you've got to be believed to be heard. Now, this is an older book. Bert Decker has written several revs of this book, but I would say this is the one book I recommend to the most people, either who work for me, who I mentor. What it gives you is a kind of a prescriptive process of how to share your point of view with someone before you start engaging them into discussion and into action. And the reason that that is so important, why it's called You've Got to Be Believed to Be Heard, even as a leader, if you've got to deliver a hard message, like we're going to have reductions in the organization, and you are all fact, people don't know what you're thinking. And if
Okay.
they can't know where their leader stands on this, or the person giving the presentation or whatever, it's really hard to hear what they're saying. So if I were to give that, and I would say, this is very painful for me. As a leader in the organization, I want us to keep building and growing, but at this point in time, we need to make some cost reductions. And unfortunately, our biggest expense are our resources. So I will walk you through this process with you. But all of a sudden you're just like, okay, this is hard for JuneAn too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm listening. Or somebody who's really frightful of speaking publicly, or even in their team speaking up. I always tell them, make a joke. Just say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm really sweating because I'm so nervous, but I really want to share something with everybody, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're human. And so
Humanizing is important.
this is
Yep.
what I love most about this book. And it is this grid system. So it makes it really easy to say, here's my point of view. Here's the action I want you to take. It helps you be an effective communicator. So that's
awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Go. We have time. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the second one I'm going to tell you about. It's called Jesus CEO: Using Ancient Wisdom for Visionary Leadership. And this is just a book that is very practical as far as, it's a how-to guide on how to be a moral character. I really, so that's a really good one. And
Yep.
then another one I would say is The Speed of Trust. And it kind of goes back to, you've got to be believed to be heard, but how you really need to establish trust before you can do business.
Those are all good books. And that's awesome because I haven't heard of any of them, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So that's really good. I was expecting to be one of the ones that are back here in my bookshelf. Yeah, but JuneAn, purposefully, the reason why I wanted you to be the first person on here is, I look up to you so much. You're an exceptional leader, and I really, really appreciate your insights. I think probably just end with this episode, and people, and I would be happy. But that said, I think there's a lot of other insights that can be gained from other leaders. Just thank you so much for participating in this with me in this experiment.
Can I interrupt? Can I just say,
Yeah, go ahead, yes.
honored. I'm honored that you asked me. I'm honored that you asked me to go first because it really reflects our friendship.
Yeah.
Our trust in each other. That
Yep.
I get to go first. But also, Joe, you've said many times to me and publicly that really your ambition in life is just to work with people that you like.
Yeah,
And
100%.
I'd work with you anywhere.
It was such a pleasure to have JuneAn Lanigan on A Leader Story. There were so many amazing insights in this episode. Please make sure to like this episode and subscribe to A Leader Story as we bring new interviews on a weekly basis. Until next time, keep writing your own unique leadership story.